The transmission from the Endurance reached Station Orion 7 on the 10th day. High Counselor Vrix was preparing the death notices for another failed expedition when his communication officer burst into his office with wild eyes and shaking hands. "Sir, you need to see this." Vrix had expected many things. A distress call, a final message from a dying crew, perhaps even silence, which was how most Kethro's expeditions ended. He did not expect to see Commander Jake Harris standing in clear sunlight, surrounded by alien plants that seemed to be leaning toward him like sunflowers following the sun. He did not expect to see a massive predator sitting calmly in the background like a trained pet. And he absolutely did not expect to hear the words that came out of the human's mouth. "Counselor Vrix, this is Commander Harris of the Endurance. Mission successful. We have made contact with the indigenous intelligence of Kethru's 9 and negotiated a preliminary alliance, requesting permission to return to the station with our proposal." Vrix stared at the screen for a very long time. "Indigenous intelligence?" He finally managed to say, "The planet is alive, Counselor. It's a single vast organism with a consciousness billions of years old. It's been killing visitors because it thought they were threats. We convinced it otherwise. You convinced the planet?" Harris smiled slightly. "Turns out we had a lot in common." The Endurance returned to Station Orion 7 2 days later. The Council assembled an emergency session, and the humans were brought before them to explain what had happened. Vrix sat at the head of the table, still not quite believing any of this was real. Cole presented the scientific data. She showed the seismic readings, the communication patterns, the evidence of a planetary consciousness. She explained how Kethru's 9 had evolved over billions of years into a single living entity, with the animals and plants serving as extensions of its body and mind. "The predators aren't random wildlife," she said. "They're antibodies. The storms aren't weather patterns. They're immune responses. Everything on that planet is connected to a central intelligence that we call Kethros." The council members murmured among themselves. The Morith representative looked doubtful. "How do we know this isn't some kind of trick? A new hunting strategy to lure more victims?" "Because it let us leave," Harris said simply. "If it wanted us dead, we would be dead. Instead, it cleared the storms from our launch path. It called off the predators. It even helped repair our hull damage by directing specialized creatures to seal the acid burns with organic compounds." "Why would it do that?" Harris looked around the table at the alien faces. "Because it wants allies, not enemies. It's been alone for 4 billion years. Every visitor has ever had tried to exploit it, to take from it without giving anything back. We were different. We talked to it. We listened. We treated it like an equal. And what does it want in return for this alliance?" Vrix asked carefully. "Companionship, understanding, access to knowledge about the universe beyond its atmosphere. It has watched the stars for billions of years, wondering what was out there. Now it wants to learn. That's all? No territory demands? No resource restrictions? It has agreed to allow limited mining operations in designated areas, as long as we treat the process like surgery rather than excavation. Careful, precise, and with its consent. In return, it will provide us with biological compounds and materials that exist nowhere else in the galaxy. Things it creates using its own body chemistry." The council debated for hours. Some members were excited by the possibilities. Others were terrified of the implications. A living planet was unprecedented. An alliance with such a being was unthinkable. Finally, the vote was called. By a narrow margin, the council approved the preliminary treaty. Human colonists would be allowed to settle on Kethru's 9 under strict guidelines developed in cooperation with the planet itself. Other species would be welcome only if the planet agreed to host them, when the decision was announced. Vrix asked to speak with Harris privately. "I must admit," the insectoid said, his mandibles clicking softly, "I did not expect this outcome. I sent your team to Kethros 9 expecting you to die like all the others." "I know," Harris said without anger. "May I ask how? How did you survive where hundreds of others failed?" Harris thought about the question for a moment. "We're humans, Counselor. Our own planet spent millions of years trying to kill us. Ice ages, volcanoes, predators, diseases. Everything Earth could throw at us, it did. And we survived. We adapted. We got stronger. By the time we reached the stars, we had been forged by a world nearly as dangerous as Kethros 9. We weren't scared of that planet because we had already faced something almost as deadly. Our home." Vrix nodded slowly. "Your species frightens many in the galaxy, Commander. You are seen as aggressive, dangerous, unpredictable. And yet, we're the ones who made peace with a world that killed everyone else. Yes, that is what frightens them most of all." 6 months later, the first human colony ships arrived at Kethros 9. They landed in the same valley where the Endurance had touched down, now cleared of dangerous vegetation by the planet itself. The colonists stepped out on the soil that had once been lethal to all life, and they found it welcoming. The planet had prepared for them. Fruit-bearing plants grew near the landing site, their produce safe for human consumption. Clean water flowed through new streams that hadn't existed before. The air, while still toxic to most species, had been modified in the human zones to reduce the most harmful elements. Kethros 9 was changing itself to accommodate its new friends. Commander Harris stood on a hill overlooking the growing settlement. Beside him was a young colonist, barely 20 years old, who had volunteered to be among the first permanent residents. "Were you scared?" the young man asked. "When you first landed here?" Harris watched as the Devastator walked past the edge of the settlement, ignoring the humans completely. Children were playing near its massive feet, laughing and running without fear. "No," he said. "I was curious. And it turns out so was the planet." In orbit above them, ships from a dozen species waited for their turn to visit. Word had spread across the galaxy. The humans had done the impossible. They had tamed a Deathworld not through conquest, but through understanding. And deep beneath the surface, Kethros 9 pulsed with contentment. After 4 billion years of solitude, it finally had what it had always wanted. Family. The galaxy watched the alliance grow, and they began to understand something important about the strange species called humans. They were not just survivors. They were not just adaptable. They were something far more dangerous and far more wonderful. They were the kind of beings who could look at a world designed to kill them and see a potential friend. And that made them the most remarkable species the universe had ever seen. High above the planet, the stars continued their ancient dance. But now, for the first time, something on Kethros 9 watched them not with loneliness, but with hope. The future was bright. And humanity was just getting started. The communication with Kethros 9 grew stronger over the next few days. Torres built a better system for sending and receiving signals, and Ryan became skilled at translating the planet's strange language. What had started as simple questions and answers was becoming a real conversation. The planet was old, older than most things in the galaxy. It had been born from cosmic dust and fire over 4 billion years ago, and it had been aware for almost all of that time. In the beginning, it had been simple, just a network of minerals and chemicals responding to the environment. But over millions of years, it had grown, evolved, connected, until one day, it woke up and realized it was alive. "It's lonely," Cole said one evening, sitting by the communication equipment. "Can you feel it? This being has existed for billions of years, completely alone. The only living things on its surface are extensions of itself. The animals, the plants, even the bacteria, they're all part of it. Like cells in a body. And we're what? Torres asked. A virus? That's what it thought at first. Every time something landed here, it treated it like an infection. Kill the invaders, return to normal. But we're different. Different how? Cole looked at him with tired but excited eyes. We're the first things it has ever met that aren't part of itself. The first truly separate beings. We're the first chance it has ever had to not be alone. That night, the planet shared its history with Bam. It came as dreams, vivid and overwhelming. The team slept in their bunks, and Kethros 9 reached into their minds and showed them everything. They saw the birth of the planet, a swirling mass of rock and heat slowly cooling into something solid. They felt the first spark of awareness, tiny and confused, wondering what it was and why it existed. They watched as the planet grew and changed, developing its own ecosystem, its own defense systems, its own way of surviving in a dangerous universe. They saw the first visitors arrive. Alien ships from distant stars, landing on the surface with dreams of colonization. They felt the planet's fear and anger as strange creatures walked upon its skin, digging into its flesh, taking its resources. They experienced the attacks, the storms, the predators, the countless ways Kethros 9 had learned to protect itself, and they felt the loneliness. The deep, endless loneliness of being the only thinking thing on an entire world. Of having no one to talk to, no one to share experiences with, no one who understood. When they woke up, nobody spoke for a long time. It killed all those people, Katie finally said. Hundreds of explorers, scientists, colonists. It murdered them. It was protecting itself, Harris replied quietly. Imagine if aliens landed on your skin and started cutting into you. Wouldn't you fight back? But they weren't hurting it. They just wanted to study it, to use its resources. From its perspective, that is hurting it. Those minerals we want to mine are part of its body. The creatures we want to study are part of its consciousness. We weren't visitors. We were parasites. Ryan had been quiet all morning, reviewing the data from the night's communication. Now he looked up with a strange expression on his face. It's asking us something new. What? It wants to know about Earth, about our home. It felt our memories, but it wants to know more. It wants to understand how we became what we are. Harris nodded slowly. Then, let's tell it. They spent the whole day sending information into the ground. Images and feelings and memories. The ice ages that covered Earth in glaciers for thousands of years. The volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. The plagues that wiped out half of humanity. The wars, the famines, the disasters. And through it all, they showed how humans survived. How they adapted. How they refused to give up, no matter how hard their world tried to kill them. They showed caves where early humans huddled against the cold, learning to make fire. They showed ships crossing deadly oceans to find new lands. They showed cities rising from the ashes of destruction, rebuilt again and again. The planet listened to everything. And when they were done, it sent back a single message. You are like me. Those 4 words changed everything. That evening, the jungle around their camp transformed. Plants that had been bent away from them straightened and turned toward the ship, not in threat, but in curiosity. Small creatures emerged from the underbrush and sat at the edge of the floodlights, watching without hostility. The acid rain stopped completely. The clouds parted to reveal stars that the team had never seen before. It's welcoming us, Cole said in wonder. It finally trusts us. Harris walked to the edge of camp, where a massive predator, one of the devastators that had attacked them on the first night, was sitting like a dog. It watched him approach with intelligent eyes, but made no move to attack. Hello, Harris said. feeling slightly foolish. The creature made a low, rumbling sound in its throat. Not a growl, almost like a greeting. "It wants to know what we want," Ryan called out, reading new signals from the communication array. "It's offering to negotiate." Harris returned to the group. "Negotiate what?" "Everything. Access to resources. Permission to study its ecosystem. A relationship between our species and it." Ryan paused, staring at his screen. "It's asking if humans would be willing to be its friends." Nicole laughed, but it wasn't mocking. "A planet is asking us to be friends. This is the strangest mission I've ever been on." "What do we offer in return?" Torres asked. "What does a planet need from us?" The answer came through the communication system, translated by Rian in a voice thick with emotion. "It says it has been alone for 4 billion years. It has never had anyone to talk to, anyone to share its existence with. It watched the stars and wondered if there was anything else out there like it. And now it knows there is. Not another planet, but another survivor. Another species that fought its way up from nothing and refused to die." Cole wiped her eyes. "It wants companionship. That's all it wants. Just someone to understand it." Harris made his decision. "Tell it yes. Tell it humans accept. We'll be its friends, its partners, its family, if that's what it needs. We came here expecting to die or conquer. Instead, we found something better." "What's that?" Katie asked. Harris looked up at the clear sky, at the stars that Kethra's 9 had watched for so long, waiting for someone to understand. "We found someone who was just as alone as we used to be. And we found a home." The message was sent. The planet received it. And across the entire surface of Kethra's 9, for the first time in recorded history, the storms went quiet. The predators settled down to sleep. The acid rain became ordinary water. The planet was at peace, and it was no longer alone. 3 days on Kethra's 9, 3 days of constant danger, sleepless nights, and the growing feeling that something was very wrong. But not wrong in the way they expected. The predators had stopped attacking. On the first night, the Devastator had nearly killed them. On the second night, smaller creatures had tested their perimeter, probing for weaknesses. But on the third night, nothing came. The jungle was silent. The eyes that had watched them from the darkness were gone. "This doesn't make sense," Nicole said, pacing the edge of the camp. "We're meat. We're food. Why aren't they trying to eat us?" Cole had spent the last 2 days running tests and taking samples. She had barely slept. Her eyes were red and tired, but her mind was racing with ideas. "Because something told them not to." "What do you mean?" "Come look at this." She led Nicole to a spot near the edge of camp where a group of local plants grew. They were tall, purple stalks with leaves like razor blades. When the team had first arrived, these plants had been leaning toward them, as if trying to reach the ship. Now they were bent away, pointing in the opposite direction. "Watch," Cole said. She stepped closer to the plants. They bent further away from her. She stepped back. They straightened slightly. "They're afraid of me," Cole said quietly. "The plants are afraid of me." Nicole stared at her. "Plants don't feel fear. These ones do. Or rather, something is making them respond this way. Something that controls them." She called a team meeting inside the ship. Everyone gathered in the small common area, exhaustion written on their faces. Torres had dark circles under his eyes. Katie kept yawning. Even Harris looked tired, though he hid it better than the others. "I've been analyzing the seismic data," Cole explained, pulling up charts on the main screen. "The vibrations I felt on the first night aren't random. They have a pattern. A very specific pattern." "Like what?" Torres asked. "Like brain waves." Silence filled the room. "You're saying the planet has a brain?" Ryan asked, his voice high with disbelief. I'm saying the planet is a brain. Or at least, it has some form of consciousness. The earthquakes, the storms, the predator movements, they're all connected. They're all controlled by something beneath the surface. Something that has been aware of us since we landed. Harris leaned forward. The previous things. They all died from different causes. Predator attacks, spore infections, volcanic eruptions, toxic gas releases. We assumed it was just a dangerous environment. It wasn't random, Cole said. The planet was killing them. Deliberately. Like an immune system fighting off an infection. Then why aren't we dead? Nicole asked. We've been here 3 days. If this thing wanted us gone, why hasn't it killed us? Cole pulled up another chart. This one showed the timeline of attacks and environmental dangers they had faced. On day 1, we were hit with everything. Acid rain, predator attacks, toxic spores. Standard planetary defenses. We survived. On day 2, the attacks were more focused, more intelligent. The creatures that came for us were stronger, faster. We killed them. On day 3, she pointed to a flat line on the chart. Nothing. It's testing us, Harris said slowly. And we're passing the tests. More than that. Cole took a deep breath. I think it's scared of us. The room erupted in questions and denials, but Cole held up her hand. Think about it. This planet has killed everything that has ever landed on it. Every species, every expedition, every attempt at colonization. It has 4 billion years of practice at destroying invaders. And then we show up and we don't die. We kill its predators. We survive its poisons. We adapt to its atmosphere. For the first time in its existence, Cathros 9 has encountered something it cannot destroy. That afternoon, the planet reached out to them. It started with vibrations in the ground, stronger than before. Torres had set up sensors around the camp, and they began registering patterns that looked almost like language. Pulses and waves in specific sequences, repeating over and over. It's trying to communicate, Ryan said, staring at the readings. Basic patterns. On-off signals. Like Morse code, but simpler. Can you translate it? Ryan worked for hours, cross-referencing the patterns with known mathematical sequences. Finally, just as the sun was setting, he cracked it. It's asking a question, he said, his face pale. The same question over and over again. What question? Ryan looked up at them with wide eyes. Why won't you die? Harris laughed. It started as a small chuckle and grew into a full, genuine laugh. The others stared at him like he had lost his mind. Commander? Katie asked nervously. Don't you see? Harris said, shaking his head. This planet, this ancient, powerful, deadly world, it's confused. It threw everything it had at us, and we're still here. It doesn't know what to do with us. He walked to the edge of camp and looked out at the jungle. The plants were still bent away from them. In the distance, he could see predators watching from the tree line, keeping their distance. The sky above was clear for the first time since they arrived, as if the storms had been called off. Tell it, Harris said to Ryan. Tell it who we are. How? Same way it talked to us. Seismic pulses. Ground vibrations. Whatever you can manage. Torres and Ryan worked together to rig a device that could send vibrations into the ground. It took most of the night, but by morning, they were ready. What should I say? Ryan asked. Harris thought for a moment. Tell it we're from Earth. Tell it our planet tried to kill us too. Ice ages, plagues, predators, disasters. Tell it we survived everything our world threw at us. Tell it we're not here to fight. We're here to learn. Ryan programmed the message and sent it into the ground. The pulses traveled deep into the planet, carrying human words into the consciousness of something older than most stars. For a long time, nothing happened. Then the ground began to vibrate again. New patterns, faster and more complex than before. Ryan scrambled to decode them, his hands shaking as he worked. "It's showing us something," he said. "Images, feelings, memories. I think it's looking into our minds, learning about us." Cole gasped and pressed her hands to her temples. The others felt it too, a presence touching their thoughts, gentle but overwhelming. They saw flashes of their own memories, their own pasts. Growing up on Earth, surviving hardships, fighting against impossible odds. And then they felt something else. Something that might have been surprise. Something that might have been recognition. "It sees us," Cole whispered. "It sees what we really are." The planet had looked into the hearts of humans and found something familiar. Survivors, fighters, creatures that refused to give up no matter what, stood against them for the first time in 4 billion years. Kethros 9 had found something it understood, and for the first time, it was curious instead of hostile. The Endurance shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of Kethros 9. Warning lights flashed across every console. The hull groaned and screamed as acid rain began eating through the outer plating. "We're losing armor on the starboard side," Torres shouted over the noise. "That acid is stronger than the report said." Katie gripped the controls with white knuckles. Sweat dripped down her face as she fought to keep the ship steady. The winds were insane, pushing them left and right like a toy in the hands of an angry child. Lightning struck the ship twice, and the lights flickered. "Hold her steady, Katie," Harris said calmly. He stood behind her chair, one hand on the back of it to keep his balance. His voice was the only calm thing on the bridge. "I'm trying, Commander. This planet really doesn't want us here." Through the view screen, they could see the surface rushing up to meet them. The black glass mountains surrounded the valley like walls. The ground was dark and covered in thick vegetation that seemed to move on its own. Rivers of silver liquid cut through the jungle, glowing faintly in the dim light. "Landing zone in sight," Katie announced. "Hold on to something." The ship dropped the last few hundred meters and hit the ground hard. Everyone was thrown forward against their restraints. The engine screamed and then went silent. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Torres laughed. "We're down. We actually made it down." "Don't celebrate yet," Cole said, looking at her sensor readings. "We've got movement. Lots of movement. All around us." Harris stood up and looked at the external cameras. The jungle around them was alive. Not just with animals, but the plants themselves seemed to be shifting and turning toward the ship. Massive trees with bark like armor plating leaned in their direction. Vines as thick as a man's body slithered across the ground. And in the shadows between the trees, eyes glowed in dozens of colors. "Everyone suit up," Harris ordered. "Full environmental gear. We need to establish a perimeter before nightfall." The suits were heavy and uncomfortable, designed to protect against the toxic atmosphere. Each one had its own air supply, temperature control, and a layer of acid-resistant material. Nicole handed out weapons from the locker. Rifles, sidearms, flamethrowers, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. "Remember," Dr. Price said as they prepared to exit, "the bacteria here will try to break down organic matter immediately. Don't take your helmets off for any reason. Don't touch anything with bare skin. And if something bites you, tell me immediately." "Cheerful as always." "Doc," Nicole said with a grin. The airlock opened, and they stepped onto the surface of Kethros 9. The first breath of filtered air tasted like metal and fear. Even through their suits, they could feel the weight of the planet's gravity pressing down on them. Every step required extra effort. The ground beneath their boots was soft and wet, covered in a layer of moss that squelched with each footstep. "Air samples confirmed 17 toxins," Cole reported, holding up a small device. plus 3 new ones the previous teams never identified. This atmosphere would kill a Veltri in seconds. Good thing we're not Veltri, Torres said, setting up a portable generator near the ship. They worked quickly to establish a camp. A defensive perimeter was marked with motion sensors and automatic turrets. Floodlights were raised to push back the growing darkness. The sun of this system was setting, and the temperature was already dropping rapidly. The first predator came at dusk. Nicole heard it before she saw it. A deep rumbling sound, like thunder, but closer. The ground shook slightly with each impact. She raised her rifle and activated her helmet's night vision. "Contact," she said quietly over the radio. "Big contact." Coming from the north. It emerged from the jungle like a nightmare given form. The creature was massive, easily the size of a cargo shuttle. It walked on 6 legs, each one ending in claws that could tear through metal. Its body was covered in bony plates that looked like natural armor. A long tail dragged behind it, leaving a trail of acid where it touched the ground. Its head was a mass of teeth and eyes, and drool dripped from its jaws in thick, burning streams. "What in God's name is that?" Torres whispered. "I believe the previous teams called it a devastator," Cole said, her voice shaking slightly. They were considered the apex predator of the northern hemisphere. Fast, strong, nearly impossible to kill. The creature stopped at the edge of the floodlights. It looked at them with intelligent eyes. It was studying them, learning them. Then it roared, a sound that shook the trees and made their bones vibrate. Nicole fired. The first 3 rounds hit the creature's head and bounced off its armor plating. It didn't even flinch. Instead, it charged, covering the distance between them in seconds. The automatic turrets opened fire, filling the air with bullets. Most of them did nothing. "Aim for the joints," Harris shouted. "The soft spots between the armor." Nicole adjusted her aim and fired again. This time, the bullet found the space between 2 plates on the creature's shoulder. It stumbled, but kept coming. "Flamethrower," she yelled, dropping her rifle and grabbing the heavy weapon from her back. Fire erupted from the nozzle in a long stream of orange and blue. The creature screamed as the flames washed over it. The sound was terrible, a mix of rage and pain that echoed through the valley. It thrashed and rolled, trying to put out the fire, but Nicole kept the stream steady. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, the creature collapsed. Its body twitched twice and then went still. The smell of burned flesh filled the air, strong enough to penetrate even their filtered helmets. "Is it dead?" Torres asked. Nicole walked closer and put 3 more rounds into its skull. "It is now." They dragged the body away from camp and burned it completely. Nobody wanted to know what would happen if the local scavengers got a taste for creatures that had been near humans. That night, nobody slept well. The jungle was full of sounds. Screaming, howling, clicking, and other noises that didn't have names. Things moved in the darkness beyond their lights. Eyes watched them from every direction, but nothing else attacked. Around midnight, something strange happened. Megan Cole was on watch when she felt the ground vibrate beneath her feet. It wasn't an earthquake. The pattern was too regular, too rhythmic. It almost felt like a heartbeat. She placed her hand on the ground and closed her eyes. The vibration continued, steady and slow. And underneath it, she thought she felt something else. Something that might have been awareness. "Commander," she called quietly over the radio. "I think we need to talk." When Harris joined her, she told him what she felt. He knelt down and touched the ground himself. The vibration was definitely there. Regular, rhythmic, and somehow purposeful. "The previous teams," Cole said slowly, "they thought this planet was just dangerous. Random predators, random storms, random death. But what if it's not random? What if something is controlling it?" Harris looked out at the jungle. The eyes that had been watching them seemed to have pulled back. The plants that had been leaning toward their ship were now standing straight. "You think the planet is alive?" he asked. "I think," Cole said carefully, "that we might be standing on something much bigger than we realized." Above them, the clouds began to swirl in a new pattern. Lightning cracked across the sky in shapes that almost looked like words. And deep beneath the surface, something ancient and vast began to pay attention to the small creatures that had dared to land on its skin. The meeting room on Station Orion 7 was cold and quiet. 12 alien representatives sat around a long metal table, their faces full of worry and fear. At the head of the table, High Counselor Vrix clicked his mandibles together nervously. His insect-like body shifted in his chair as he looked at the holographic display floating above the table. The image showed a planet. It was beautiful in a terrible way. Dark green jungles covered most of its surface. Black mountains rose like teeth against blood-red skies. Lightning storms danced across its atmosphere, and rivers of what looked like liquid metal cut through the landscape. "Cathros 9, Vrix said, his voice clicking and buzzing through the translator. 17 expeditions, 17 failures, 406 lives lost." The representatives murmured among themselves. A tall, blue-skinned Morath female leaned forward. "My people sent their best warriors. They lasted 6 hours before the jungle consumed them. The Velthari scientific team had the finest protective equipment in the galaxy," added a small, floating creature made of light. "The spores ate through their suits in minutes. They died screaming." Vrix raised one of his 4 arms to silence them. "We all know the history. The question is what we do now. The resources on Cathros 9 are beyond measure. Rare minerals, unique biological compounds, energy sources we cannot find anywhere else. We need that planet. Then we abandon it," said the Morath. "No resource is worth more death. There may be another option." Everyone turned to look at a small screen in the corner of the room. On it was the image of a species that made many of the council members uncomfortable. They stood on 2 legs. They had soft skin and small eyes. They smiled with teeth like predators, humans. "Absolutely not," the Morath said immediately. "We do not work with them." "They are dangerous," agreed the light creature. "Unpredictable. Violent." Vrix held up a datapad. "They are also the only species that has volunteered for the mission. Their ship, the Endurance, is already in this sector. Their commander has accepted the assignment." "They accepted?" The Morath looked shocked. "Did you tell them about the death rate?" "I told them everything. The acid rain, the predators, the toxic atmosphere." The commander's response was... Vrix paused, checking his notes. He asked if the planet had good fishing spots. Silence filled the room. "They are insane," someone whispered. "Perhaps," Vrix said. "Or perhaps they are exactly what we need." 3 days later, the Endurance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Cathros system. It was a medium-sized human vessel, not particularly impressive by galactic standards. The hull was covered in scorch marks and patches from previous missions. It looked like it had been through hell and come out the other side. Inside the ship, Commander Jake Harris stood on the bridge with his crew. He was a tall man in his 40s, with gray hair at his temples and calm brown eyes. He had seen things that would break most beings. None of it showed on his face. "There she is," said Katie Dunn from the pilot's seat. She was younger than the commander, with short red hair and quick hands that danced across the controls. Cathros 9. They weren't kidding about the storms. The planet filled the view screen. It looked angry. Lightning cracked across its atmosphere in constant waves. The clouds swirled in patterns that seemed almost purposeful, like the planet was watching them approach. "Atmospheric readings?" Harris asked. Engineer Ben Torres pulled up the data on his screen. He was a heavyset man with a thick beard and grease stains on his uniform that never seemed to wash out. 17 confirmed toxins in the air. Acid content in the rain is high enough to melt through standard hull plating in about 4 minutes. Gravity is 1.3 times Earth normal. Temperature ranges from freezing at night to boiling during the day. Sounds lovely, said Lieutenant Megan Cole. She was the team's biologist, a woman with dark skin and braided hair who had spent her career studying the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. What about the wildlife? Torres shrugged. Everything wants to kill us. The previous teams documented over 200 predator species before they stopped documenting anything. Because they died, added Dr. Ryan Price from the medical station. He was a thin man with glasses and a nervous habit of tapping his fingers against his leg. Just to be clear, they stopped because they died. We got it, Doc, said Nicole Grant. She stood near the weapons locker, checking her rifle for the third time. She was the team security officer, a muscular woman with scars on her arms and a look in her eyes that said she had seen combat. Everything wants to kill us. That's not new. Commander Harris smiled slightly. Torres, how long until we can land? I can have us in atmosphere in 2 hours. Finding a safe landing zone might take longer. There are no safe landing zones, Cole said, reading from her datapad. The Valkyrie team tried landing in a desert region. Something came up from under the sand and swallowed their ship. So we land somewhere else. The Kryn landed on a mountain. The mountain was apparently sitting on top of a volcanic vent. It erupted within an hour of their arrival. Harris nodded slowly. What about the valley? The one with the black glass mountains. Cole checked her data. No previous team has tried it. The readings show it might be slightly more stable than other regions. The glass formations suggest the area experienced massive heat events in the past, but nothing recent. That's our spot then. Katie turned in her chair. Commander, are you sure about this? Every team that has gone down there has died. Every single one. Harris looked at his crew. These were good people. They had followed him into dangerous situations before and come out alive. But this was different. This was a planet that had killed everyone who touched it. Let me tell you something about humans, he said quietly. Our home planet tried to kill us for millions of years. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroids, plagues, predators, floods, droughts. Everything Earth could throw at us, it did. And we survived. We adapted. We conquered. That planet down there is classified as a Class 15 Deathworld, the most dangerous rating in the galaxy. He paused. Earth was a Class 12. We grew up on a world that would kill most species in the galaxy. This is just a little worse. Nicole grinned and slapped a fresh magazine into her rifle. A little worse sounds like fun. Torres, take us in, Harris ordered. Everyone else, suit up. We've got a planet to explore. As the Endurance began its descent toward Kethros 9, none of them knew that something was watching. Something vast and ancient and aware. Something that had killed everything that had ever touched its surface. The planet felt the ship approaching. It stirred in its long sleep. It prepared its defenses. It did not know yet that these visitors were different. It did not know that for the first time in 4 billion years, it was about to feel something it had never experienced before. Fear.